We talk about the final test results of the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid. We debate the pros and cons of all the available transmissions out there, and we give you some insights of our recent tire buying survey. Next on Talking Cars. Hi, and welcome back to Talking Cars. I'm Jennifer Stockberger.
I'm Ryan Pizlakowski.
And I'm Mike Monticello.
So we're going to start off today talking about tires, taking advantage of Ryan being here, who's the key driver in most of our tire testing. Consumer Reports conducted a pretty comprehensive survey. 34,477 CR members were surveyed about their tire purchases, their tire installations. And it was, what we've heard before, that it was a rather complex, time-consuming, not enjoyable process for some of them. Their words, not ours. But Ryan, why don't you give us some of the highlights of that survey?
Yeah, so this is always a topic of concern because, like you just said, buying tires is not fun. No one enjoys that. Maybe if you're a real enthusiast, you'll like this. But
you might enjoy buying tires.
I like it. I think it's neat.
Well, it's
I understand
fun
the stuff.
if you can improve the tires that are on your car.
Right.
Maybe if you can get better tires than you had before.
Improve the performance of the vehicle,
improve the
right?
handling or whatever.
But
that's always nice.
Most people don't want to buy tires. They don't care, they're not that educated on it.
And they're always shocked at how expensive they are when they go
they're
to buy
huge,
them.
Right. Yeah. So we did the survey. We found that our members are listening to us. And in general, I was suspecting this, but people are replacing tires usually because they are old or wear out. 48% tire age, 46% wear. I think there's an overlap there. There's a misconception of what's
age is really wear.
Right. But the key thing here, I think, is educating yourself ahead of time. That you can have a good experience. Give yourself enough time. Your tires aren't bald and you're running into the store before a snowstorm. You're going to get whatever they have in the store. Unfortunately, there's hundreds of sizes, models, brands out there. The store can't carry them all on the shelf. They just can't. They're big. Tires are big. Imagine the facility that would have to carry every size, right? So if you go ahead of time, know what do your research, what type of tire, what performance attributes you're looking for.
Right. To change, to your point.
Right.
What do you want to make
research
better?
that. So ahead of time, you can order them ahead of time, and then when you go to put them on, you only have to go there once. Maybe not go there twice, because if you go there that one time and you get the tires that day, you're not going to get necessarily what you want.
Because when you order tires online, say from Tire Rack or a company like that, you can have the tires shipped either to an installation place or your home, correct?
Yes. So we've done this before. I actually went and bought tires from a few different online retailers, Tire Rack, big box stores like Sears, and then a local tire dealer, Town Fair Tire. And I went online ahead of time, ordered the same tire for our Nissan Altima at the time. Went there, once they showed up to the store, because they order them ahead of time for you, because they didn't have them in the store. Okay. Tire Rack sent them to a local installer. They have a list of installers. So when you buy those tires, you can literally pick from a list. It tells you the price right there, what it will cost for installation and stuff. It was a pleasant experience. I wasn't rushing in there in the store trying to figure out what I needed that day, getting whatever they had.
Right. And that was reflected in the survey. People were very happy with their online purchases and going to the installer.
Yeah. It's funny. Because the survey people said the most significant takeaway was that the reality check that replacing tires is often an expensive, time-consuming, and complex process.
Right.
But a lot of them were still very happy with, the results of ordering, doing the research online and then, having them installed, and the money that they can save. And also that haggling your price or for extras does get you a little, can save you some money. But most people don't do it. But those that did haggle a little bit actually save.
It's doable, yeah. And I think a message we're trying to convey is, first of all, you can have a tire that is a little more expensive, but wears way better, lasts longer. And then another tire that's much cheaper, and there's actually that tire is actually a better value. It will last longer. By the time you mount and balance that other set twice for that one set, assuming all other factors are equal, performance and everything, but there's value there. So don't necessarily only take price into consideration. Right. And our survey showed that our members aren't doing that, and that's great.
And what's cool is, of course, Consumer Reports has these incredible tire ratings, these very detailed tire ratings that you and Gene Peterson and Josh Jones all take care of.
Right.
And your boss, Gene Peterson, his tip from doing all this, he says, check the CR ratings for both performance and estimated tread life and narrowing down your choices. Then use price and free extras to help break the tie if you can't figure out which tire to go with.
Right.
So I think that's a great tip.
Mounting and balancing,
Yep.
rotation, and those were some of the things I think in the survey that people were able to haggle.
Yeah,
So,
it's giving yourself time. The tires get around 4:30 seconds. Give yourself some time to figure it out, because if you're doing it last minute, you're going to get forced into something. And it's even a cheap set of tires is still a considerable amount of money.
Right.
So don't blow it. You know, give yourself the time.
I like that. Don't blow it.
Yeah,
Did
I
I
didn't
do that?
get it. Oh, that was tricky. I don't even think he meant it. But anyway, the big takeaway, even though we're in the summer, we're not talking about snowstorms.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe it's not so crazy to think about, are you going to need tires this fall?
Right.
Or, even hydroplaning, we get these summer storms. Give yourself the time. I think the key takeaway of the survey, do your research. Don't be afraid to haggle. Get what you need, not what they want you to have.
Especially if you're looking for snow tires, do not wait on those, because those are seasonal and they sell out, you're done for the year.
So go out and look at those snow tires in your garage.
Yeah,
Now,
check
if,
them
you have
out.
if you have a second set of snow tires, go and look in the garage, see if they're low or not on tread depth. And if they are, order them now.
Right, order them now. So great. So very interesting survey, and of course that will be covered on consumerreports.org. Moving on from the track, at long last, and I say at long last because we have gotten a number of questions regarding this car, the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid. So a lot of interest on your side. Just a little bit of detail, 2.5 liter 4 hybrid version of the RAV4, CVT transmission versus the 8-speed in the regular RAV4. This was a really good comparison between these two cars that we tested, in that they were both XLE trim.
Same exact
So the
trim.
same trim, different drivetrain, good side by side. So, Mike, we've completed testing on this car. Give us some of the highlights.
Yeah, so we've tested both cars. We first tested the regular RAV4, and now we've tested the RAV4 Hybrid. And, the RAV4 Hybrid, in a lot of ways, improves on some things that we didn't like as much about the regular RAV4.
Right.
First of all, there's the fuel economy. It gets 10 miles per gallon better. It gets 37 miles per gallon overall, which is pretty impressive for a compact SUV.
Yeah.
Because it has the electric assist, it leaves the line in a very smooth fashion. And the hybrid drivetrain is quieter than the kind of rackety sound. The regular RAV4 has such a raspy engine when it accelerates hard.
It was really loud.
We used the word raucous.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't even think we've used that word in some time to describe the regular, right?
So the hybrid is a little more refined, and usually we wouldn't be as happy with a car that has a CVT versus an automatic, but because the engine is so loud in the regular RAV4 with the automatic, this actually works better in a lot of instances.
In the hybrid, the electricity fills in some of that. Where a CVT sometimes lacks, you don't get that real stringy, rev holding and whatnot, because the electricity is kind of helping in that.
Well, it's also quicker. It's a half second quicker,
it's quicker
to 60 miles per hour so you're getting better fuel economy, quicker acceleration, a little more refined drivetrain. I'm not going to say it's super refined. The engine can still get loud, and the CVT still will wind out during hard acceleration. It'll hold the revs really high.
Yeah.
But in many respects, it's a better car, and in other ways, it's exactly the same. The way it handles and rides and those
ride comfort, all of those. Yeah. So apples to apples, Ryan. Hybrid or regular?
I would take I never thought I'd say this, but I would take the hybrid. It's a better car. It's a better car.
Yep.
I think in most situations it is, especially if you care about fuel economy, you definitely get the hybrid, without question. If you live in a very snowy area, I'd be a little concerned because, remember, this is an electric all-wheel drive system. This does not have a differential at the rear, like, say, we just tested the Subaru Crosstrek plug-in hybrid, and that has a true differential in the rear, so it has all-wheel drive all the time. Subaru cares about that. Compromise with that vehicle, less cargo room in the rear. So Toyota has electric all-wheel drive, but it doesn't compromise any of the cargo space. But the downside is there's going to be times, even just in wet weather, you hit the gas really hard, the front tires are going to spin for a little bit before it starts sending power rearward. And at highway speed, the all-wheel drive system isn't going to work. So there's some compromises with both.
That's a great system, though. That's the same hybrid system they've been using in the Highlander and now this. tried and true.
Yeah.
per se.
Right.
We expect it to be reliable.
Right.
Yeah, there's just certain situations where
yeah, absolutely.
it physically can't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a good
And
point.
I would argue, even if you didn't care about fuel economy, it's still a better car.
That's true.
Yeah,
That I
just
agree
all
with
in all,
you.
I
It's
think
nicer
it's a
to drive.
nicer car to drive.
It's a little more refined than the regular RAV4.
So, of course, if you're looking for more details on the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid, you will find the full report at consumerreports.org. So, moving on to audience questions. As always, we'll say it again, keep them coming. We love, love, love them. TalkingCars@iCloud.com. The first question is video. We love your videos. Is from Michael. Take a listen.
All right, my friends, my buddies at Consumer Reports. I know in one of your recent podcasts, you talked about how, really when you guys did your temperature testing, that black cars, black interiors, it just didn't really make a difference much on temperature. I don't know. I will tell you what, getting in that black Chevy Malibu right now with the black leather interior, and it's morning, that car is hot. Of course, the windows aren't tinted. In Texas, we tint our windows now, so.
So yeah, to answer Michael's question, when we did the study of dark car versus light car and how quickly they heated up, it was in relative to the protection of children in cars, this tragedy of people either inadvertently or children gaining access to vehicles and perishing in the hot temperatures. What we were trying to give a little kind of myth busting to was that if you had a child in a light-colored car or a light-colored interior, that you didn't have to worry as much. So the truth is, you have to worry in both cases.
Right.
To your point, Michael, absolutely, the darker car got hotter more quickly. The rate was higher, but both cars still reached dangerous levels within the hour. So certainly, I suspect, for Michael, if he had a light-colored car, light-colored interior, still sitting in that parking lot in Fresno, it probably would be pretty uncomfortable for him to get into also.
Bottom line is hot is hot.
Hot is
and
hot.
Dangerously hot is the problem.
Right.
And, to remind people of what that study showed, it was during a 78-degree day, the interior of a lighter car reached over 104 degrees during a 1-hour test period. The dark car reached over 109. But both got over 100 degrees in
short
an hour.
times.
Yeah,
That's
within
the
an
concerning
hour,
part, right?
That's dangerous.
Yeah.
Either one is dangerous, and that's the point. And that's why what we were talking about, especially related to that podcast and that story, was how important it is to not leave children unattended or pets in the backseat of your car.
In any car.
And
so, yeah.
really on any day, because even like a cool day, it's still, a 50 or 60 degree day, it's still going to get hot in there.
And you were in California, you do see, you lived in California, there's a lot of light-colored cars, light-colored interiors to make it more comfortable, but it's still pretty uncomfortable.
Right.
Okay, so that brings us to our next question, which is from Claudia from Vancouver. I've got a question concerning the different types of automatic transmissions, the CVT, continuously variable transmission, and DCT, dual clutch transmission. What are the pros and cons of each? The DCT seems to be all the rage these days, but I've heard it's not good for towing and that it can be sloppy in stop-and-go traffic. I'm tempted to say that I prefer a traditional transmission, but all these people preferring these other engines can't be all wrong, can they? I'm going to throw this one to you, Mike, Mr. Transmission.
I don't know if I'm Mr. Transmission, but I've certainly driven a lot of them over the years. I love that Claudia knows her transmissions, first of all.
As do I.
It's a great question. I would just correct her a little bit. I don't think so much that people are preferring these transmissions. It's more that these are the transmissions that the manufacturers have chosen to give us, mostly in the interest of fuel economy.
Right.
That's where they're trying to improve fuel economy. So if you break these down, she's looking at the pros and cons. So continuously variable transmission, unlike a traditional automatic that uses a torque converter, to transmit the engine's power through the gears, a continuously variable transmission uses a pulley system and a belt to,
Constantly
constantly vary the gear ratios, within a wider range.
Right. Kind of infinitely, right?
Yes,
Exactly.
And a dual clutch transmission, think of it as underneath where you can't see, it's kind of like the bones of a manual transmission, except instead of having a clutch pedal, it takes, electronically it takes care of the clutches and the shifting for you. So it acts kind of like an automatic, but we'll get to that in a second. So pros and cons. So pros of a CVT, pretty much fuel economy.
Right.
That's the pro. They are very efficient. The con is the drivability. And mostly it's this rubber banding effect. You know, you're driving along, but you give it a lot of throttle and the RPM just go, because
you've said flaring.
Yes,
or,
the transmission is very efficient. So whenever possible, it tries to have the revs as low as possible. But when you're looking for acceleration, it's trying to give you the most acceleration. So it allows the revs to rev really high, whereas a normal automatic might shift those gears to keep bringing them back down.
Right.
So what ends up happening is if you have a 4-cylinder, which a lot of CVTs are paired with 4 cylinders, and the engine's loud, now it gets exacerbated because the revs are so high.
Right.
And noisy. I know we've talked about that.
Yeah. Dual clutch transmission. The pros are that it allows for really quick shifts, which is great if it's in a more performance car. Also better fuel economy typically than a regular automatic. And they can also be usually quite smooth shifts as well. The downside is low-speed drivability, just as Claudia said. That is the problem with them.
Stop and go, right?
Stop and go traffic, the dual clutches often, not always, but often, it seems confused as to what gear it wants to be in. You're rolling to a stop and then you get going again, and now it's not sure if it wants to be in first or second. And there can be some low-speed clunking that you feel from the transmission as well.
And delay. We've said delay.
Right. And of course, that gets compounded if the engine is a turbo and there's some turbo lag.
You don't know what's causing the delay.
Right. So now, which brings us to the question about towing. Now, we have heard from some people that they have had some overheating issues with DCTs and CVTs when towing. We haven't experienced it ourselves, so we can't say for sure that it's a problem. But we have heard experiences with that. Obviously, never tow more than what your car is rated for is the first thing.
Right.
As far as she talked about a traditional automatic. The funny thing is, so CVTs were kind of the rage in the early 2000s. Then they started switching more to DCTs, and then they've actually backed off on that. Manufacturers are focusing more on CVTs again, and these 8, 9, and 10-speed automatic transmissions. The regular automatic has kind of made a comeback, right?
Yeah.
But we've noticed some problems with those too.
Right.
So, maybe it's teething problems with all these brand new transmissions. But the really good ones, the benefit is now you've got your good low-speed drivability, right?
Yeah.
And you've got, 10-speed automatic transmission. You're going to be able to have very high, very tall highway gear. So you can get
So you're
fuel
saying
economy.
the good traditionals with
The
the
good
multi-speeds, right?
And that's what I would say to her, is if you can find a car that you like that has a traditional automatic, I would go with that personally over the DCT or the CVT. In general, it's a much better driving experience.
Now, one thing, and maybe it's a question for both of you. When there's those multi-speeds, we have experienced some of that, what I'll call searching.
Yeah.
Because the gears are close, depending on, if it's an area of speed where you drive often in, where it's trying to find the right gear because they're close.
Well, and there's more gears, there's more choices.
Exactly.
So it takes a second to figure out where that.
Well, and it has so many to choose from. So in a sense, it could always be shifting.
Right.
Which
it is.
Not a problem. Not a problem if they're really smooth shifts and it's really responsive. Then it's not a problem. But it's a problem if the shifts aren't that smooth, or if it lets it rev out too high. Then there's some problems.
With any of these, they're not all created equal. Nope. So there's CVTs that are actually pretty good.
Right.
There are
and they're
dual
getting
clutches
better.
Yes,
I would say they're getting better.
Absolutely.
They're doing some of these sort of artificial shifts. So instead of just letting it wind out, it'll actually bring the revs back down. It'll feel almost like a regular automatic. Obviously, look at our road test, look at our ratings. We talk about transmissions. In every road test we do, we give a breakdown of what's good and bad about each transmission.
We critique them all.
I do find it funny, and to Claudia's question, that they're making this new technology feel and sound like the old
traditional.
So I find that funny.
Which is, I think, why they're going back to really focusing, spending a lot of money on these 8, 9, 10-speed automatics.
There's nothing's perfect. They're all a little bit of a compromise.
Yep.
And it's just.
So that was a great question, Claudia. Mike, you gave us a ton of detail, but I think it was warranted. So hopefully it helped everybody in the audience. Moving to our final question about SUVs. As we are moving more towards SUVs and trucks, are we increasing the chance of more accidents due to their high center of gravity and rollover risks? This is a good question because I do think, despite some changes that we'll talk about, I do think there's still a reputation of the rollover risk, the higher center of gravity that lingers with SUVs and trucks. The truth is, it's hard to tease out the right numbers because SUVs are so much higher in popularity.
They're dominating the market now.
Right, so you just can't say the amount of fatal crashes. You have to look at it as a rate. So we did find some great stats from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, IIHS, that did it as a rate of single vehicle rollover crashes per million registered vehicles. So it makes it so it doesn't matter how many. And that data set, at a high of 168 driver deaths in single rollover crashes per million registered vehicles in 1980, is down to 3 in 2017. It's come way down.
It's unbelievable.
Ryan, what are the whys of why it's so much better?
So an SUV in 1980 was much different than it
Not
is
the
today.
SUV of today.
So all SUVs back then were a body-on-frame vehicle. So there was a frame, body bolted to the top of it, big axles underneath it. It had a higher center of gravity. Trucks today, modern trucks today are still built this way. Large, full-size trucks. Even your Tahoes, Suburbans, Expeditions are still this way. But even those you're starting to see less and less of them. We're going to what we call a unibody. It's a big car, essentially.
Well, we say car-based all the time.
Yeah, or exactly, car-based SUV. They're a little lower. Their center of gravity is lower. And electronic stability control is huge. We've said it a million times. Ever since seatbelts, it's the best thing that has ever happened.
In terms of safety, right?
Right. You know, if you can keep these vehicles on the roadway during an accident, as opposed to leaving the roadway, the chance of a rollover is way less, and the chance of fatality is a lot less. The minute a vehicle rolls over, the chance of fatality goes up considerably. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's really incredible that we've come this far with that. I'm going to quote something out of here, the same study. ESC reduces the risk of fatal single vehicle rollovers by 75% in SUVs and 72% in cars. That's huge.
Right.
I mean,
I think,
and I'm sure there's a ton of fatalities that go with that, right?
absolutely.
So I think the point is we were heading toward that with the truck-based SUVs and the lack of safety systems back in the 70s and 80s,
right? Yeah.
But because of these car-based SUVs, we've gone away from truck-based. Now we're with car-based and ESC being standard since 2012.
Right.
It's just made a world of difference.
Right. And if you were to look at it today, a car versus these modern great SUVs, the car is still, the chance is a little less still in the car because that's much lower.
But yeah, in fact, ESC we say should be on more vehicles. We talk about buses and big trucks, and I think you'll see more of that as its effectiveness becomes more and more documented.
Absolutely.
Great question. I think the risk is low. To summarize that, those two things have made a huge difference. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Keep the questions coming. TalkingCars@iCloud.com, and we'll see you next time.